you talking about?
Are you doing a direct capture to hard drive?
I am,
Cool.
Saves a lot of tape.
Nice
Except
looking
it
out.
says it doesn't know my camera's here.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it know my camera's here?
Will this light fellow ever get something in camera and plugged on the table? Or do you not deal with anything on the table?
I will, but not yet. Okay.
So what software do you added in?
Right now I use Pinnacle to because it catches the fastest on this old computer. Okay, running. Okay. We all happy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happier than a pig in a watermelon patch.
Quiet on set. 3, 2.
Hi, welcome to the Emergency Preparation and Cooking Show. I'm Reg McDaniel, and in today's episode I'm extremely excited about our guest. I've known Jim Phillips for about 5 years now. He and I went in business together a few years ago. We've maintained our friendships and contacts throughout the years. And I want you to know about a DVD that you all want to get your hands on. It's only $5.50. It's made by Jim and it's called The Foundation, which is your true needs and priorities. So go to this site you see on your screen now and log on, and you can get a copy of this for your library. You want to go through it. It's very detailed and it's very, very interesting. The whole family will enjoy it. So our show today is on how your 72-hour kit can kill you. And as I said, Jim Phillips is my guest. Before I bring him on, I just want the audience to know that many times when I have guests, I have prepared questions and want to make sure the viewers don't miss out on any details that I think are important. But I've seen Jim Phillips give this presentation several times, and so this time I'm going to sit in the audience, take notes, and after I bring him up here, so you take some notes too, put on your thinking caps and pay attention. Come on up, Jim. Appreciate having you here today.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you know, there's this topic about 72-hour kits. We hear a great deal about that. And 72-hour kits or emergency kits or evacuation kits are important, I think, for people to have. The problem is, it's what is not in them or what you're not told about them. And that's why I like to use this title. It's called Your 72-Hour Kit Could Kill You. And I want you to understand, when I'm talking about things, we're going to look at one of these kits. I'm not saying these things are bad or what's in there, the individual things. But when it's all put together in a kit, you see this bag right here? You take a look at this thing and say, boy, you go downtown, you buy one of these, and you think like, I got what I need. I'm okay.
Yeah, and they'll sell for anywhere from $150 to $200, and you think you're good and well.
That's right.
And so I'm going to have you pick this apart, and I'll leave the stage now, and you go ahead and teach us, okay?
So that's the idea. Let's take a look at it. Because you have to take personal responsibility for you and your family. That's what it comes down to. And if you're just relying on a salesman that's going to sell you these things, and they're saying, well, here's what you need. And if you just take that bag home, you put it on the shelf, and you say, well, got what I need. I'm the man. I took care of things. And then when the emergency comes and you're digging into this thing and you're looking at these things for the very first time, you're going through the bag and you're going like, okay, well, there's one of these and there's one of those, and you pull them out, you take these things out and you go through it, and all of a sudden you begin to discover that there's things that are missing to make your life work. And that's what I want you to help you understand. I'm going to look at some of the common things that are in these kits that are a real problem. You know, you have a thing like this, well, these little light sticks that you crack them and they glow green or blue or different colors. Obviously, a good thing to use. Lighting is a useful thing to have. There's nothing really wrong with that. And there's personal kits that have all kinds of little things that you might use. That's really great. There might be a stove or something like that. Now, of course, the problem I have with stoves is we're talking about these short-term emergency kits. What are you going to cook? In most of the cases, we're talking about foods that you're just going to use. It's what I call expedient food. Expedient food means it's something that you're just going to take and use exactly the way that it is. So the stoves are not necessarily all that useful. You may have different kinds of rations that are in there. Here's some of these long-term storage rations. I mean, they're okay. It's like eating sawdust, lard, and sugar. It's about what it tastes like. But I guess it'd keep you going for a little while. But that's not the real problem. These things are all nice and easy to understand, and they would, in fact, be useful. There might be some matches that are in there. You know, there's a cup. That's a useful thing to have. Of course, a little toilet paper, sanitation. Maybe you're going to need that where you're going. But now let's get down to a few things that are a real problem. In fact, I want to back up for just a second. Everything that I do when we're teaching our classes and what you see on the DVDs and videos, it's all based on principle. And I'm going to back everything up that we do to principle. Let me give you just a few concepts here very quickly that you can understand. One of these is this. Let's talk about some of your true needs and priorities, things that you really, really must have. There's an order of priority to these things. Now, very briefly, I'll give you a basic principle I call the law of provident living. The law of provident living has 4 parts to it. Order of priority, very quickly, is, now I like to use keywords in these things. You may define these things however you want to. Keyword that I use for the number 1 in this law of provident living, oh, by the way, you say provident living, what's that? Provident living is nothing more than making provisions for the future. If you're doing something to be ready today for what might happen tomorrow, next week, next year, next winter, next decade, whatever it is, that's all that provident living it is. It's making provisions for the future. So here's our list, if you will, of principles in the law of provident living. Number 1, I like to use the keyword spiritual. Define that however you want to. There's just more depth of character, capacity, energy to you than meets the eye. Okay. Number 2. Now number 2 is the one that makes the difference between whether you live or die. That very simply is attitude. You see, if you lose your attitude, you lose your life. It's as simple as that. How do you define attitude? How do you determine attitude? The simplest way that I found to define attitude is a very simple concept. It's how you emotionally respond or react to what's going on around you, especially when it's out of control and you can't control what's happening. And you've seen people, well, we call it when they lose it. You can tell when somebody's having an attitude attack, right? Okay. Well, how do you develop an attitude that says, I will be okay no matter what. I don't care how bad it is, what's going on in my life, I'm okay. And by the way, I'm filled with joy in the process. How do you develop that? And how can you change your attitudes if you say, well, I want to get ready for maybe emergencies or things that happen. I want to live providently. Here's how you change attitudes. Very simple. It's number 3 on my list. And number 3 is knowledge. That's where I spend most of my time, is helping people gain knowledge. But please understand something. I cannot share any knowledge with you. When we're talking at this time right now, this is not sharing knowledge. This is sharing information and data. You gain knowledge by taking information and then getting experience with it. That's when it becomes knowledge. Okay, so we're going to help you do that by giving you good information, and then you go get the experience with it. And then number 4 on the list, and this is really what we started talking about in the beginning, these things down here, I call it stuff, material things. So there's our provident living list. It's spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and then stuff. Let's talk about the stuff. Within the stuff, we have what we divide it into 2 areas. I call it the parachutes, if you will. What's a parachute? You fall out of a plane, you don't have a parachute on, it's all over quickly, just within seconds. If you have a parachute on, you can float down to the earth. So I like using the concept of parachute because people understand it. There are preparedness parachutes. Then when we're talking about long-term things, we're meaning things that are more like your permanent provisions. There are 4 parachutes, and this is the reason I want to get you to this parachute concept. When we're talking about the emergency kits, we're talking about things that happen quickly. 2, 3, 4, 5 days, maybe 2 weeks. Here's the parachutes very quickly. Number 1 parachute is clothing. Why clothing? Well, if you get thrown outside when the weather's really, really bad, something happens in your outside. In our area here, we don't have hurricanes here, but we do have earthquakes potentially. If we have an earthquake in the middle of winter, in the middle of night, middle of January, everything's on the ground and you're outside, what you're wearing is going to determine how healthy you are, how strong you are. It's going to determine whether you live or not. So very simply, clothing is top of the list. I look at worst case things not because I'm gloom and doom, but because this simple concept. If I'm prepared for the worst, then if the worst happens, it's okay. If I'm prepared for the worst and the worst doesn't happen, life's easy. Simple as that. So let's take a look at these parachutes. Number one parachute was clothing, right? Number two parachute is water. How long do you live without water? Well, we say about 3 days. Well, maybe you made it 4 or 5, but they won't be good days. You must have water all the time. If you run out of water, your health goes downhill very quickly, and as a matter of fact, 3 or 4 days later, you expire. So we have to have water. So, clothing, water. Number 3, this is one that people don't hear much about, don't know much about, because our system takes care of us, and that's sanitation. The reason that sanitation is a parachute is that when emergencies occur, when things break down, when things are not working, our systems fail on us, what has happened is all the automatic things that were taking care of us are now gone. And sanitation is one of those things that if you get sick in the first 2, 3, or 4 days, and then your health goes downhill and you die 2 weeks later, what was the point of being prepared? So sanitation is a parachute because you can get in trouble very, very quickly. So clothing, water, sanitation, and number 4 is special needs. Special needs are things that each family or individual may have their own unique need. That may be things like medications. It may be things that individuals have to have around them. Certain special nutrients may be the case. Now, food, I didn't say food's a parachute because most of us can go what? A week fasting, 2 weeks fasting, and you really would be okay. I've done that for 2 weeks just to see what it was like. Didn't eat anything, but I didn't go without water. So food is not a parachute because for a few days or a week or so you would be okay without it. And I'm not telling you you should fast. I'm just simply saying that food isn't going to get you in trouble unless it's a special need. So there's our parachute list, and then I'll very briefly give you the permanent provisions list, which is a little longer. Then we'll take a look at our kit where I started, and we'll see how some of these things kind of add up. Okay, the permanent provisions, the long-term things that you need are clothing, water, sanitation, same thing. Then nutrition. After a little while, we really do need to eat. And I noticed that I said nutrition. I didn't say food because there's a big difference between what a lot of people eat and what is actually nutritious. And so, when you're in a stressful situation, when your life is upside down, when things have gone sideways on you, and you're under a lot of stress, you actually need better nutrition then than when life is kind of easy and you can relax. Okay, after nutrition, shelter. Now, if your clothing is right, and I teach people how to do this, you can live outside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the dead of winter, below zero. If your clothing is right, you can do that. I teach people how to do that. But after a little while, shelter would be a nice thing to have, so shelter. And then I talk about a general thing we call wellness. This is about how you rest. It's a little bit about recreation. It's about body elimination and a bunch of things besides just food and water that help you have good wellness and good strength. Then we have tools, and then we have supplies. Tools is an example. This thing I always carry with me, my pocket knife. This is a tool. But so is fire. Fire is a tool. Fire allows you to do a variety of things. So you have tools and supplies. Now, let's go back to our emergency kit. This idea that's being promoted about having emergency kits, 72-hour kits, be careful of what's in there and understand what's in there and why what's in there. That's why I teach the principles. And oh, by the way, these things that I've just very briefly gone over are in that DVD that Reg mentioned at the beginning. It's a part of what we call the Self-Reliant Family series. It's about helping families become self-reliant, and it's a foundation DVD, and it's available at a very nominal cost, just the cost of delivering it to you so you can get started. You'll learn about these principles in there. There's 2 hours of them in there. All right, back to our kit now. Let's take a look at this thing. The things I put out on the table, they're like okay, but they're not parachute items. Let's look at a few of these parachute items and see what's missing. One of them that we see in these kits all the time that they're trying to tell you that you need is, I'll hold up one of these things, a tube tent, okay? You've got a tube tent. You say, well, you ought to have a tent, it's shelter, and you see, shelter comes in if your clothing is poor, and I wouldn't expect there to be a lot of clothing in such a kit like this, because that's a personal thing. You have to take care of that. So you have this idea of a tube tent. Well, now, Reg, what was the weather like when we were coming in here to do this? It's like it's snowing outside. It's not really cold. It's 30 degrees or so, or 32 degrees, snowing lightly, and there's a little bit of a breeze blowing. You ever seen a tube tent? Well, take a look at this thing when you set it up. You got this rope you string between a couple of trees or car doors or something else, and then you have it run through this tube of plastic. You put some rocks or logs or something in the corner, and you make this little pup tent shaped thing out of this plastic sheet. And what's missing? Well, two ends are missing. What's the wind going to do? It whistles right through that thing. So a tube tent will actually only work if it's like dead calm. But if it's calm and there's no precipitation coming down, what do you need a tent for? On a day like we had right now, where you have a little bit of wind and it's snowing out there, a tube tent is absolutely useless as a tube tent. Oh, by the way, I'll give you a little hint how you use it. You don't set it up as a tube tent. You do it in a way that we teach people how to fold up a plastic sheet that will become your shelter. So you leave it down on the ground and tuck it all around you and tuck the ends underneath, and you could slide down inside with a sleeping bag if you had one, so that you would be inside out of the weather. So a tube tent is okay, but see, it's the concept, oh, put up a tent. A tube tent won't do anything for you. By the way, the other thing is when you take a look at this thing when we've set it up, you got my sleeping bag laying beside it, and you'll see that my sleeping bag is almost as long as the tent. I've got like 7 inches on one end, 7.5 inches on the other end, and there's my sleeping bag. If the rain was falling straight down, it'd splash up inside. Here again, it sounds good, but does it really work? So what I always tell people to do, this is what I do, is get your stuff out, play with it, use it. See what it's like. If you have a tube tent, hey, if you're only 3 foot long, it'll probably work. But if you're taller than that, you've got a problem. Okay, so we've got these tube tents that are in there that I just want people to understand what they will or will not do and use them as a bed rack rather than a tent if you have one. All right, well, let's look at another one of these little things that's kind of interesting. We have these, in fact, I've got one here that's open. They have these, they're made from a space blanket. We used to call them space blankets. They're these reflective blankets. And you can find them as just a sheet, it's this big old sheet of reflective mylar. And the idea is that this will return some of your body heat or reflect it back to you, which it does do. A lot of them now are made in the shape of a bag. And I can just unroll this thing here, and it's open on one end, and you can slip down inside of that thing and pull it up around you. But here's the thing you notice about that bag. In fact, we've got some pictures. We'll go outside and show me. It comes up to here. So I can't get all the way inside of this bag. Again, it's not big enough. If you're 4 foot tall, it's going to be great. But how do these things really work? What do they really do? Well, I can put my hand inside there, and I said, I can feel a little bit of reflection. And obviously, it's going to stop the wind from blowing on you, and that's good. And it'll keep some of the rain or snow off of you, and that would be good. But does this really provide insulation? Is there any insulation value here? Actually, there's none. This thing is a very, very thin, about a 1/2 mil thick mylar sheet, and there's no trapped air in that material itself. There. Excuse me. There's actually no trapped air in that material. It's going to get this little bubble of warm air around you, or I'll say trapped air. But how much insulation is in that? Here's what I tell people to do. Now, you read the bag. Okay, look at the bag on here, and it says reflects 80% of body heat. Okay, the radiated heat. Reflects 80% of radiated body heat. Well, that sounds great, 80%. Here's the question. How much heat do you lose through radiation? That's what you need to experience and find out. To give you the bottom line very quickly, if you were to get inside, let's turn you into a black body radiator. That means that we take all your clothing off. That's why we do this at night on a mountaintop out there where it's dark. But I'm up where it's high, where it's clear, so I can get maximum deep space radiation. And then I'm going to paint myself, or paint you. I don't have to do this. I've been through enough paint. We'll paint you flat black and let you stand out there and radiate. Now you lose heat through radiation, conduction, and convection. All right, so if you lose heat those 3 ways, what percentage of it is lost by radiation? About 10%. So what happens is when the little label on there says reflects 80% of radiated body heat, well, you're going to get 80% of the 10% back. That means 8%. That's if you were a perfect radiator, but you're probably not. My point is this. 80% sounds like a big number, and the label makes it sound like it's going to do something great. This is what I tell people to do. If you have one of these, I didn't say you shouldn't have them. I said understand what it will do. This is what I'd recommend you do. Get one of them out. Go outside on some evening when it's chilly or cool, preferably below freezing. Get inside of that bag and you spend the night in it, and you tell me how well it works. That'll give you the idea that, you know what, I'd like to have something better than that to sleep in. You see, sleeping clothing, we call sleeping bags and things like that. This is intended to make up for the fact that maybe you're not wearing the right clothing or you don't have a sleeping bag. This does not substitute very well for sleeping bags. I've used them in the summer on cool evenings. You're okay, but it's like, give me a sleeping bag. Give me some blankets any day over what this thing will do. So it's limited, not useless, but it is limited. Just be very, very careful. Okay. Let's look at something else that we find very commonly in these heat packs. Now, notice that most of what's in here is not about water so far. We haven't talked anything about clothing. In these kits, they don't tell you about that. They've tried to give you some things to make up for the fact that your clothing might be rather poor. And here's one of those other things they give you to make up for them. Some of these little heat packs, these are these things, you know, okay, well, we rip one of them open, you've seen them. They have these little white bag that's inside, and what it actually has is some carbon, some salt, a little bit of water, and very, very fine iron filings in here. And when you put iron in that environment and give it some oxygen, it actually rusts. This is an iron burner is what I call it. It's to cause it to rust very quickly, and it generates some heat. Rusting is an exothermic reaction. So we're just going to let this thing sit here and heat up for a moment. You read the bag and it says, it gets hot up to 120 to 140 degrees. That sounds pretty good. It'll stay warm for up to 18 hours. Okay. But first off, let's take a look at it. You look at it and you say, well, that's how big it is. So I could heat that hand, or I could heat that hand, or my right foot, or my left foot. And I guess if I had 30 or 40 of them, I could lay them all over my body. But the idea is you're thinking like, well, I've got this little heat generator in there, but how many BTUs are in it? Not very many, that's the problem. Here's the real difficulty, and this is what they don't tell you. It's not on the package. And I've been feeling this thing to see what would go on, because this actually came in a little kit that I had. These take a few minutes to get up to heat, but you can detect right away if they're going to be heating up. And so far, I don't feel anything. Here's what they don't tell you. These have an actual practical shelf life of 2 years maximum. Actually, if you're going to have them in your kits, you want to rotate them every year. Get new ones and get them in there. Get new ones in there. And if you've had them in your kits for 3, 4, 5 years, you know what? They're probably useless. Here's the problem. You thought you had one of these things that was going to help you, because I got cold hands. My hands are freezing. My feet are freezing. I'm going to get these little things out, open them up, and they're going to get hot, and you get them out, and they've been in there for 3 or 4 years. They do nothing. Now what are you going to do? You don't have a backup. Or if they're like this one's just barely starting to get warm. Good edit point, sorry. See if I got it back. Bag in my car. I've been doing presentation after presentation, and then I wore my voice out, and then I got run down, and I just about lost it for a little while. And we're coming back.
Well, at least this one's going to last forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, take your time.
I think that's the magic of being able to edit. So you see, there's the problem with these things. They're very limited in what they'll do. And if you didn't understand that, both in terms of the size, the amount of heat that's there, but the real problem is, if you've had them for 3 years and they're dead, what are you going to do? Okay, so be careful with those things. Did I say they don't work? They do work. You just have to understand what the limits are on them. Now, Let's take a look at one of these other things in these kits that typically irritates me. Not because it's going to hurt me, but because people don't understand what they're missing and what the problem is. I take a look in these kits very often. Here's one, and it has some of these, they're called aqua blocks. This is water in a box. It's just, you know, you can get them in cans or bottles, or in this case in these boxes, kind of like juices come in. It's a nice way to have water. It works very well. It has a good shelf life. It's very stable. This kit, by the way, was intended for 2 people. This was a 2-adult kit. So I have 2 sets of 3, a total of 6 per individual. Now the question is, how much water do you need? That's the real question. What must you have to consume every day? Well, we sometimes hear that you need to have 2 quarts of water a day. That's the absolute survival bare minimum if conditions are good. If conditions are hot or they're cold, by the way, what most people don't understand is that when it gets cold, particularly when it gets below 0, you dehydrate very rapidly and you've got to make up for that. So how much water do you need if you want to be prepared for emergencies in general? You must have 1 gallon per day per person. Simple as that. A gallon per person. And if you're less than a gallon per person, you've got a problem.
Okay.
All right?
We had the little tape come loose.
Oh.
You go ahead and hit that.
We'll pull it over behind it a little bit more. A little more tape on the brake.
Where do we put our tape?
Should be right there.
You need a woman to find it for us.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I saw you using was behind that bookcase, so you learned back there, right?
It's actually over by the light.
Oh, I see it. It's on the behind you, Richard.
Oh.
I see it's
Right
behind
here.
you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Jim has it.
Tape isn't that sticky.
Wow, it's kind of hard to do duct tape material. It's not really what it's designed for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I need to back up and see where we should start again.
okay. How much water we need?
Why don't we, I'll just pick it up in the water section again. Let's just be in there.
Okay.
Get the tape out of there. Can we get something on the brake here? We'll just
What are you
Yeah.
spraying?
colloidal silver. Tell me when you're ready. Okay, let's take a look at one of the other things that's in these kits that irritates me. Not because, well, I'll tell you why. Because they don't tell you what's missing and they don't tell you how much you need, and you bought this kit and you thought, oh, that's what I need. And that's about water. Okay, let's think about water. How much water do you need per day? We hear that generally you need about 2 quarts of water a day. That's kind of the common statement. But if you're under stressful conditions, or temperatures are high or temperatures are low, and something most people don't understand is that when the temperatures are below 0, the colder it is, the faster you dehydrate, and you've got to have water that you're consuming to make up for that. So what I'm going to tell people is this: you must have 1 gallon per person per day as a minimum. That's what you want to store. All right, let's take a look at this kit and see what they've got. Now, one of the ways of packaging water is it may come in some of these block forms. These are kind of like how your juices come. It's a great way to store water. It works very, very fine. You can get bottled water, different ways of doing that. Now, this is a kit for 2 people, and in here I have 2 sets of 3 of these things per person. All right, it says right on here 8.45 fluid ounces. So essentially I have a cup of these. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 cups of water. How many cups does it take to make a gallon? Well, there's 4 cups in a quart and 4 quarts per gallon, so it takes 16 cups to make a gallon. I have 1/3 of a day, approximately. So I've got 1/3 of a day that's in there. All right, so you just have 1/3 of a day. That just means that you can go through part of the day and then you need to find some more water. But what happens if you don't have a potable source? Water that's clean and pure and safe to drink. Well, let's look in our kit here. And as a matter of fact, there are some water purification tablets. water purification tablets can be a good thing to have because they'll kill any of the microbes that are in the water, the bacteria and viruses. And if you look at these, and by the way, this is a good one. These will work just fine. And this one is going to, let's see, how many tablets are in here? I was trying to read this real quickly. I think that there are 30 of them in here. Okay, and each one of them does a quart. So I can purify 30 quarts of water. Well, that sounds pretty good. Now, let's take a look at our kit that was down here and the things that are in it. And you know what I have? I have a cup. And I'm supposed to put, what, a tablet in that? Or what do? Take a tablet and then drink a quart of water? There's not even a container in here to purify your water in. And if you didn't know that and you couldn't find one, what are you going to do? See, that's the problem very often with some of these pre-prepared kits. They look good, they feel good, it's this nice big bag of things, and it makes you feel like I have my parachute. You put the thing on like a parachute and wear it and say, got my stuff, I'm okay. But if you don't know what's in there, you don't know why it's in there, and you don't understand your true needs and priorities in there, then all you've done is turned your life, your well-being, your safety over to somebody else, that's their idea of what should be in there. Every one of these things is useful. Every one of these things has its place. But as you can see from what I've been saying is, perhaps they have a shelf life, perhaps there's not enough, or perhaps one of the things that would make it work right is missing, and nobody told you that. It's not on the instructions that came with this thing that says, oh, by the way, we didn't put that in there. That's kind of like not good marketing. If you tell all the things that are not in there what the problems are, they don't tell you.
So Jim, how do you fix the problem of the quart of water yourself, so that you can purify that?
Okay, good question. What do you do? Let's say that we're in this situation. Well, more than likely, I may be able to find a container. I can find something that I could put water in, an old juice bottle, a soda bottle, or something like that. I could come up with something if this is all that I had. Ideally, I like to have multiple ways of purifying water. Some of the portable water filters, because those you can just pump water through them and use it immediately. These, when you put it in the water, they have to set for a while. If you're really thirsty and you want to drink right now, if you have a young child who's under a lot of stress and they're like thirsty, they want to drink now. Do you know how long you have to let these set? At room temperature water, you need to give them at least 30 minutes before you use them. You don't just drop it in there and drink the water. So one of the disadvantages of tablets and things like that is you've got 30 minutes to an hour that they need to sit in the water to be sure they kill the stuff. And by the way, one of the reasons you have to give them that long is because every one of these things, this is a poison. Literally it is. It's going to poison bugs. And so it's not a very concentrated amount. You have to give it enough time. What I like to do is have the portable water filters, so I can just pump water through it, drink immediately, and then you have the chemical backups that allow you to, kill the critters in the water and then consume the water. You start having to think outside the box is one of the things that you want to do. If I had this kit and this is all I had, I'm going to be looking for a container. You can probably find them. Now, if you want to learn more about actually putting together a what I call an evacuation kit, in fact, I don't like to use the word 72-hour kit. It's too limiting. If you said, well, I'm set for 72 hours, that's 3 days, what are you going to do for day 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10? And as we've seen with some of these disasters that occur, what happens is, well, the idea of the 72-hour kit was sometime within the next 3 days or so, perhaps there'll be some services that'll come in that'll take care of you. And if they show up in 2 to 3 days, great. What if they don't? We've had some events that have occurred where it's been many days, even weeks. And I don't just mean the Katrina event. I'll go back to Hurricane Hugo. We had people that were cut off and did not have services or support or help from the outside for 6 weeks. They were on their own. I believe that you need to be prepared for longer than 3 days or 4 days. As a matter of fact, I think it's a very positive thing to prepare yourself to be self-reliant. That's the word I like to use, self-reliant, where I can take care of myself and my household. That puts me in a position to reach out and help other people around me. I want to be self-reliant for weeks, months, a year or two would be great. Now, suppose you're saying like, all right, I really believe that we ought to get prepared with some things. Where do you begin? You begin by understanding the principles. Let's go back to the principles. We're talking the material things. The material things, this stuff is the short-term parachutes or what? It is my clothing. Why? Because I may face the environment out there. Now, by the way, some people say, well, I live in Tucson. Clothing's important to you down there, but it's not clothing for the cold. Now we're dealing with how do you take care of yourself? It's in the middle of July when you're outside. You've got to have the right clothing that protects you in those conditions. If you live in an area where there's a lot of biting critters and mosquitoes and things, it's not mosquito netting, that's clothing. It's the stuff you put on your skin to drive them away. You see, clothing is more than just shirt and pants. Clothing is anything that you would use to give you personal, portable protection. It is in fact shelter, but it's other kinds of protection. Sunscreen. If you're in Tucson, Phoenix, and those areas, you need sunscreen out there if you're going to be outside. You need the big hat, the sombrero, that gives you the shade for your head and your shoulders and your neck. All those kinds of things are important. So you see, clothing is more than just our shirt and pants. And by the way, I talk about this all the time. This pocket knife, by the way, you notice it's tied on a cord, so I can't lose it. Okay? This is clothing to me because first off, I would rather do a presentation without my pants and without my knife, and I don't do presentations without my pants. So I wear it all the time. So I have it with me because this is what I can use. This is a tool that I can use to produce my clothing. If it's in the dead of winter, I can get into the couch cushions, I can get into the front seat of my car or into my snowmobile or into the airplane seat or something like that, cut it up because there's insulating materials in there. We think of it as padding, it'll insulate you. So this is clothing because it helps me to produce the clothing if I need it in an emergency. So we talk about getting back to these principles and understanding what they are. Well, it's clothing, it's water, it's sanitation. You've got to take care of that. Again, there wasn't a lot in here to help you with your sanitation in this kit. It usually isn't in there. And by the way, a bar of soap is not a good thing to do. You know the problems with bars of soap? The problem with bars of soap is that the bacteria actually like to live on it. We think that it's going to like kill them. They don't. You take a look at bars of soap, they're a breeder of bacteria. They're fat-based, and the bacteria like the fat. Now what it helps to do is flush the oils and fats away so you can wash it away. You're better off using a liquid detergent that, number one, you're not contaminating the bottle, you're just taking out what you need, and then it'll flush away much more easily and wash away. So bars of soap, you think about it for sanitation, you're actually going to be spreading things around when you hand it off. From one sick person hands it to another sick person, you've just spread bacteria is what happens. So bars of soap are not a good thing to use, and that's what you commonly find. In fact, there's one in this kit because people don't understand. So taking care of our sanitation and our personal hygiene is a very important thing to do on the short term, and then be sure you're paying attention to your special needs, your household and your family. Then the long-term things, when we get longer than just a few days, well, what do you need? Clothing, water, sanitation, shelter. We want to have some shelter in there. We want to have some nutrition in there. We also want to have things that help us with our overall wellness. By the way, one of the things for me when I get in a lot of stress, I would like to be able to take my CD player with, for me, some good symphonic music, put on a pair of headphones and say, give me 30 minutes just to kick back and relax. I need to get my head back. That's a part of wellness. It's a part of mental, emotional wellness that helps you be okay to deal with hard things. Then we have some tools like the knives, but we could be talking shovels and rakes and things like that. Even a bag to carry things in, I call that a tool. That's a tool for packing and carrying things like that. And then we get into the supplies. Well, we think about toilet paper and food as a supply, but rope and wire and different things like that, and tape. Now, for the women, you know, it's hot glue. By the way, when the electricity doesn't work, what do? A candle and a glue stick, and you can heat it and stick things together. That can be a supply kind of a thing. And for the guys, what's it for us? Duct tape. We'll fix everything with duct tape and baling wire. Those are supply kinds of things that you'll use up that will help you take care of yourself. There's many, many things that we can put on the list. Well, I hope this information helps you a little bit to understand. And I'm not here to pick on a commercially produced kit or slam dunk on them exactly. I'm here to educate you and teach you, because what's important that you understand what your needs are, what's in there, what's not in there, because the responsibility for your well-being is in your hands. It's not in mine. It's not in the guy that sold you the stuff. It's in your hands. So that's where getting the understanding of these principles and concepts is so important. And that's what I like to do, is teach people about them. That's why we're publishing these things in the Self-Reliant Family series. Oh, and I think I started to say something earlier, Reg. We've got like the one DVD that gives you the foundation principles, that one that we get to people at a very, very low cost. I want them to get started. There is a 2-hour DVD that's called Ready, Set, Evacuate. And that is about building a real evacuation kit that is based on the principles that we teach, that will let you go for days and weeks, and you can start expanding, because you've said, well, if I can do 3 days, I can do 6, if I can do 6, I can do 12, I can do 12, I can do 24. And if you can do a month, you can do 2 months, but it's all on the same principles. You don't just have a kit that sits over there for one thing and you have other supplies over here. They all merge together. That's why we talk principles all the time. Anyway, I hope those things will help, and I hope this is done what you would like to get done. Reg, any questions or suggestions? And I'll go for
Yes, there's just a couple things that should be in a 72-hour kit that a lot of people are not aware of, that many times are not in a 72-hour kit. Well, one of them I see you do have, which is a hand crank AM radio. Okay, so because if the electricity's down, you're not going to see TV, you're not going to be able to plug in your radio.
That's a tool.
And you want to know what's going on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you hear the news of when they're going to be coming to help you or whatever. Another one is the flashlight. There's the shaker flashlight we're all familiar with. You've got one there. There's one that you can crank that's a flashlight. Okay, so that's something that's really important. And then just a general first aid kit, because you might get splinters from digging people out of rubble or something like that. So you definitely need a first aid kit in there. So I just wanted to just hit on those few things that definitely need to be in there that many times are not. The other thing I wanted to share with our audience is in a future episode, we're going to be interviewing a gentleman by the name of J. Allen South, who's written a book on how to turn that 72-hour kit into a 14-day kit with just a few additional things. So he's going to share that and how he wrote that book and why he wrote it and things like that. But I really appreciate being with us here today, Jim, and you've really given us some great information that everybody can take home to their families and take care of themselves and not be a victim and have an adventure rather than a survival story.
Absolutely. You want to have yourself prepared so you can do that. And those things that you mentioned like that, when we take a look at Ready, Set, Evacuate, building a real evacuation kit, those are all part of it, plus a bunch more of things that people need to have. And that kit that we put together, like for the Ready, Set, Evacuate, it starts out as a 2-week kit. I mean, if you can do 3 days, you can do 2 weeks just like that when you do it right. So we just begin at 2 weeks. Then you either have extra supplies you can help somebody else with, or you can simply go longer. And I believe it's important that we're prepared to help other people, not just look at ourselves only. So absolutely, you're right.
Well, the last thing I want to say before we go to our next part, where we're going to be doing some recipes for our show today, is if you go to our website that's showing on the screen, we can hook you up with some links to Jim's site, and he's got a lot of really good information that you want to include, and he'll be on some future episodes and actually show us how to make that clothing he's talking about, and it's very special clothing that I highly endorse. And so look forward to that. Come to our website, www.emergencypreparation.com, and we'll link you up with those additional tools that you can use for yourself and your family. Thanks again.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Okay, there's only one thing I'd like to redo,
Okay.
if you feel comfortable, and that is when I introduced you and you came up.
Sure.
I'm going to do it again, and if you feel my intent of the TV show is to, like you, educate people, take the mystery out of it, take the trepidation out of it, show them how to save money. And so when I bring you up, I'd like you to say, I just want to say before I get started here, how important this show is that Reg McDaniel's doing, that you need to watch every episode. He's going to really teach you a lot of things. Just because it's nice to have someone of your prestige endorse something that's good for the public. Sure. In my eyes, you know what I'm saying? And we were kind of awkward there at first, you know, and that'll be what we'll do instead of that awkwardness.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So we'll just redo that and then we'll be done.
Okay. Now, what you see on TV is what you're going to get, so you need to move over. Luckily, I have 3 cameras, so I got you in. But,
that's why I come in if it's weird.
Yeah. It's weird. So I'm going to step over here and I go that way. So we'll just start the introduction all over again.
Okay.
And he can't see into this, so that's not an issue. I hope.
Okay, we set?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Emergency Preparation and Cooking Show. I'm Reg McDaniel, and today's episode I'm extremely excited to share with you. I have a guest today that's been a good friend of mine for over 5 years. Jim Phillips is his name, and he and I went into business 5 years ago. We've kept close contact, we've stayed good friends, and here he is today to be on our show. He's going to share with us how your 72-hour kit can kill you. And before he does that, I do want to share with you the DVD that he has put together for you that's very inexpensive. It's only $5.50. It's called Part 1, The Foundation, Your True Needs and Priorities. This DVD, you can go to our website, www.emergencypreparation.com, and for only $5.50, this DVD is something that you and your family can really learn from. And we'll also provide some additional links so you can get some additional stuff that Jim has to offer. So without further ado, let me bring Jim on. Come on over here, Jim. It's good to see you.
It's good being here again. Thanks. I appreciate being here. You know, have a media like this where we can share concepts with people. I think it's important. Reaching out to them in what you're doing and with this program, I think is very, very vital. Different people learn different ways and through different media, and when it's done in an interesting way, as your shows are, and when you've tied it with food and all these other things and the topics that you brought in there, I think it's important. So I appreciate being here and being a part of it. Share some of these concepts with people.
Well, thank you. Now, usually I have to help my guest with questions and make sure they don't forget important details, but I've seen Jim's presentation on this many times. So I'm going to sit in the audience today, take notes, put on my thinking cap, pay attention, and I want you to do the same. And then if I have any questions that I think he might forget about, which I don't think will happen, I'll just shout out the question from the audience. So Jim, you go ahead and start, and thanks again for being on the show.
Glad to do that, and hopefully I don't get lost either.
And that's good.
Good.
I like that introduction better, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Richard, what do you think? Think we're done?
Yeah.
Dish it out, we can take it.
Okay. Yeah, everything's running? Yes, okay. So, 3, 2.
Well, you know, there's a lot more that I can keep saying here, and there's many, many details in this, but I think we're about out of time for today's show, so we probably ought to cut it off there, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all the time we have for this part of our episode today. We're going to go to some recipes next. But next episode will be part 2 of how your emergency preparation kit can kill you. And so you want to be sure and be here for the next episode and not miss out on that, okay? Take 15.
Really? Yeah, we're doing good. We haven't done a lot of that. And we are at 3, 2, 1.
Well, you know, there's so much that I can say about this, and it's a lot of fun to be talking to you, but I think we're about out of time for today's presentation, or this segment in here. So, Reg, let me cut it off right here, and let's see what we need to do to finish this up later.
Okay, well, that is all the time we have for this episode. And we're now going to go to some recipes, cooking with food storage. But next week we're going to have part 2 of how your emergency equipment can kill you, your emergency preparation kit. And Jim will be here. And so you want to be sure and tune in next week for part 2. You don't want to miss that. And if you do miss it, you can go to our emergencypreparation.com website. You can buy the DVD on the next episode. So thanks for watching so far, and we'll see you on the recipe segment next.
Okay, you know, one of these times we ought to teach people how to make a real kit. You know, I've been tearing this one apart right here, but let's show them how to do a real kit if we'd like to.
Okay, I'll bring mine, you bring yours.
That's right, and maybe we ought to go off in the woods and have more fun than in the studio, don't you think?
And we can demonstrate how you actually use it.
Yeah, and let's do it in the winter too, when it's below 0.
Okay.
Are you game?
I'm game, because I know what you know, because I listen and I've learned.
Okay, cool. We'll do it anytime. That's what we'll be prepared for. So,
okay.
Good. All right.
Thanks.
You bet.
Cut. Oh, that was great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.